Hi, I'm your host, Danielle Hernandez, and welcome to Let's Talk About Us. I would punctuate this, but there's nothing stopping the United States from acting crazy right now. Have you looked at some of these headlines? This past weekend was the 4-year anniversary of the Pulse Massacre. That's the gay club in Orlando, Florida. I know you knew that. Excellent. Now, June is Gay Pride Month, and yet it is in June that the Trump administration announced these rollbacks on healthcare discrimination for the trans community. That is not a healthcare act. That is an unhealthy care act. In fact, remove the word care. Now, today is Monday, and the Supreme Court takes action. Supreme Court rules. Here we go from The Intercept. Even with court ruling, trans rights are still under threat. Which brings me back to Friday, June 12th. When the Trump administration announced, guess what? We found more reasons to deny health care to human beings. So let's discuss. Human beings are curious creatures, aren't they? I mean, as much as we need each other, want each other, desire one another, we keep seeking ways to force each other away, deny people the care they need, and make them jump through hoops unnecessarily to achieve the same things that we let other people get for free. What's that about? What is it about us? Why? Why do we struggle to care for our fellow human being? I don't understand it. I mean, to be fair, not many people do. But there are still people making laws, making rulings, and exercising power over the people that they're subjugating. For example, do you even know what a trans person means? Let's define it. Here we go. The definition of transgender: denoting or relating to a person whose sense of personal identity and gender does not correspond with their birth sex. That's it. It's simple. Everything these days seems to be about race and gender. And that's not new. That's not unusual. Look at what's going on in the 50 states. Come on. All you have to do is take a look at the healthcare bills that are coming out, the types of surgeries that are allowed. The lines are blurred because there's misinformation being perpetuated by our government. And remember, the transgender community is a community of people. They're human beings, like you're a human being and I'm a human being. We've got blood flowing through our veins. We've got bones supporting our system. We breathe air into our lungs. So for all human, what's the big deal about? Well, this document is over 300 pages long, and it is so not meant to be read by the layman. It's funny because they use terminology with the intention of clearing up confusion. But have you taken a look at this thing? Over 300 pages long, and I have to research words and coding every other line? Okay, this is clearly meant for your lawyer's lawyer to read. But today, sweeping the nation, the Supreme Court stepped in and said, no discrimination. So where does that leave this bill that just got announced? Keep an eye on it. Don't forget about it. Just because the Supreme Court made an announcement doesn't mean that this current administration is going to adhere to that. This administration has a reputation for doing whatever they want. Now, this news comes to us live during the Black Lives Matter movement, which has taken the world by storm. And I mean the world. Yes, we have protests happening in the street. Ever since George Floyd's murder under police custody, as some websites will put it. By the way, custody implies guardianship and protection. I don't know about you, but I don't see anything protective or guardian-like about pressing your knee into a man's neck for 9 minutes. Now, of course, the protests have sparked a lot of emotional responses, and we must acknowledge that just over 2 weeks after the scandalous murder by a cop of George Floyd, another black man has been murdered by cops. His name is Rayshard Brooks, and it happened in Atlanta, Georgia. There's so much loss occurring across the nation right now. But now's the time for us not to be turned against one another, but to recognize that even though our losses are not the same, we are grieving. We are grieving together. We must must thank every protester in the street today. Yes, it's an inconvenience to people living their lives. And yes, it's disrupting what we had come to see as normal. But remember that it's only when people take to the streets in protests that we see huge changes being made. Look at the civil rights movement in the 1960s. That didn't happen overnight. That didn't happen over 1 week. That didn't happen over 2 weeks. It took years of consistent, demanding union, and that we moved forward knowing that we would not stop without seeing changes. And those changes continue to be challenged today. What's so important to remember is that with the Black Lives Matter movement occurring, and with June being Gay Pride Month, when we bring these two factions together, we have an incredible insurgence of people looking for civil rights and liberties. We're all humans. We need health care. Did you know that nobody was born perfect? Did you know the human body requires maintenance? And did you know that maintenance is why we look to healthcare to protect us? Thank you to doctors and nurses and EMT workers and every division of labor that goes into keeping our bodies strong, returning our bodies to health, mind wellness as much as emotional wellness. Thank you to that world. Some people try to use legislation to make it confusing, but it's not confusing to know that every human needs another human to look after them. And it's even better when we have more than one, when we have a collective. You know something that's so interesting? We feel like we can't do things alone. And then we all feel like we are alone. But let's take a look at history. I like to call this segment, Then and Now. Walk with me. We're not actually walking anywhere. Once upon a time, there was a fabulous shade of green, similar to this one. Now the main difference here was that this shade of green came from arsenic. You know arsenic, right? It's a deadly poison. Now we think that's common sense, and yet in the 1800s, arsenic was the key ingredient to making this exquisite shade of green. And this shade of green made its way into homes everywhere. And not just homes, but textiles, toys. You were finding it all over the place. Well, it turns out arsenic does not have to be consumed to affect the physical human body. And there were all of these strange cases of families being found dead in their homes, children choking to death after getting this wallpaper in their mouth, isolated incidents, collective incidents, and slowly throughout time, people pieced together that this wallpaper was maybe not such a good idea. So what happened? Nothing. Nothing except backlash, mockery. You know how people mock other people when they don't see their perspective. Oh, it was not until Queen Victoria herself installed this wallpaper in the palace and had a diplomat stay overnight that she learned there was something seriously wrong with it, because that diplomat became so gravely ill overnight that he missed their meeting because he almost died. So, only once it affected the royal family did the government look into what was actually going on. Now, tell me, what do you think would happen? You would think that they would educate the masses, step up, acknowledge their mistake, and get rid of it. But oh no. Oh no, no, no. Wallpaper sellers didn't want to lose their business. Home decorators didn't want to lose their business. It was not until the consumer, aka regular people like you and me, joined together and stopped buying this wallpaper that it stopped affecting people. Literally, the only thing to be done was to join together and to stop using it. So right now what we're seeing is people joining together and stop accepting this callous behavior. We're talking about not taking care of one another. We're talking about finding reasons to hurt one another. Humans are curious. We seek each other out. We hurt one another. We sometimes destroy one another. And feel good with that. Why? That's a whole other type of mental unwellness that must be explored. Now it's June, it's Gay Pride Month, and so we must acknowledge that Black trans women are among the most targeted because they fall into both demographics, Black and LGBTQ. So it is with this awareness that we must acknowledge we know better. We know arson is a poison. We're going to stop putting it in our wallpaper. We know that people's lives are in danger simply because they display who they are. So what's important to recognize here is it does not matter what you believe about their gender. It is what the person presenting themselves to you declares themselves to be. And it's up to us to acknowledge them. This could be why it's hard, because yeah, we're being called to think about our fellow human. I spoke to my cousin to help me out with this. Preferred pronouns are they, them. So when I spoke to them, I discovered a lot of valuable information. They told me about the gender unicorn, which can help with your gender identity. Link down below. I filled one out. Do you want to hear it? This is my gender unicorn. Gender identity: female, woman, girl. Gender expression: feminine or other. I am a theater student after all. Sex assigned at birth: female. And that works for me. Physically attracted to: men. Emotionally attracted to: women, men, and other. Because I love people, okay? I love people. We're being called to improve the standard of living for all. Standards of living comes with being alive. How you decorate that standard of living can be your privilege. I was taught that I lived in America, land of the free. But I would put a little asterisk next to that because there's a whole lot of legislation that apparently qualifies whether you are free or not. Spread the word, people. There are avenues to reach out for. There are action steps that we can all be taking. Thank every single protester out in the street, even if you don't agree with it. Yes, people are screaming, defund the police, because we're tired of paying for those batons and the gas canisters and the rubber bullets and all this other heavy artillery that you are using against your fellow American. Sworn to protect and serve. We're not trying to get rid of you guys. You've been very useful. What we do want to do is force you guys to acknowledge that too much of your work is contingent on force, abuse of power, and excessive brutality. And even as roars to defund the police come forward, we're not asking you to go away. We're not asking you to be abolished. We are asking you to assess the jobs that you are capable of doing without exercising deadly force. I hear people saying, but Danielle, if we don't do it that way, how will we do it? There's always another way. But we have to look for it. And if we keep resorting to doing the same things, we'll never find it because we won't be looking. I'm looking. So in this summary, we had an unhealth bill come out discriminating against the LGBTQ community, specifically transgender. Boom! Followed by the Supreme Court going, no, you cannot discriminate based on sex, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity. So now that we know better, what are we going to do about it? Because we can all do something. We can choose to do nothing. We can sit in silence and hope someone else does something. We can thank every protester in the street because let's face it, we're not in the streets right now. We're looking at our phones. We're looking at our computers. We're looking at our iPads and our technology to tell us what to do. But it has to come from within, people. We have to share information. We have to share solidarity. Remember when I told you that story about the arsenic wallpaper? Well, we are currently being fed poisonous thoughts, poisonous news stories, and poisoned against each other. It's time to stop drinking that poison, friends, and it's time to stop buying it. Now, we have people coming together because we need healthcare and we need access to it. It has to be affordable. It has to be around for everyone. Otherwise, what is the point of healthcare? Why is there any kind of discrimination when it comes to healthcare? Why do humans believe that some are worth taking care of and others are not? And Is that something worth preserving, is it? Below you will find links for Pride and Pride counseling. Forward any information you can. Reach out to your loved ones, especially if they are part of the trans LGBTQ community, in the Black Lives Matter community. And remember, just because we're focusing on these two factions of people doesn't mean we're forgetting about everyone else. The whole world needs us, and the whole world needs us to work together. And watching these protests erupt all over the world, we can see it's starting to happen. Thanks for talking about us. If you have questions, comments, concerns, comment down below. I'll see you on the other side of the internet.